Welcome to Empowerment Radio. My name is Dr. Friedemann, and I'm so glad that you decided to join me. Empowerment Radio is about giving you the insights, tools, and solutions to address some of the most challenging aspects of our daily lives. So sit back, relax, and empower yourself. Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. We're talking about invasive thoughts. Those thoughts that pop in your mind and just scare you, as if there is some little monster inside of you that just spouts out random nasty things that make you feel distressed, that make you doubt yourself, that make you wonder if there is seriously something wrong with you. Well, those thoughts are something we have to deal with. More and more people are dealing with those thoughts and they don't really know what to do, how to overcome them. And there are also different methods. Some methods seem to really work. Some methods feel like, it's a constant battle with yourself. So today I want to just shed some light on what I found is really helpful to overcome and deal with those invasive thoughts. So the first step, there are 4 steps. The first step is the step that sounds the hardest, which is when you have a thought like this coming up, stay neutral. What? How can I stay neutral when I'm thinking about, stabbing someone I love or jumping off a bridge or anything like that? Well, I know it's easier said than done, but keep in mind what we just talked about, that when you are interpreting the thought as something you have to be afraid of, when you are giving it some kind of a association, a judgment, oh, this is bad, oh, this is a terrible thought, oh, I don't like this thought. In that moment, you put super glue on that thought, and that thought gonna stick with you and make you think about it over and over again. So if you can stay neutral and just be the observer for a moment and just have those thoughts come in and out, as I said, 3,000 an hour. Chances are this could be a thought that has been there before. You just didn't notice it. You were not paying attention to it, and it just disappeared. But then maybe there was a moment where you did pay attention. Maybe you felt a little weak, or you felt a little just out of sorts, and there was a thought, and you grabbed onto it. That's not neutrality. That's giving it power. So staying neutral is also possible if you know a little bit about thoughts, because the reason why you're anxious about those invasive thoughts may be some of the things, the myth about thoughts that you have heard or that you have told yourself. So the first thing I want to tell you about thoughts is you're not alone with those invasive thoughts. Apparently 90%, including myself, have invasive thoughts. And they are coming and going. And this is not a sign of disorder or an insanity. It is just a normal part of what our mind is doing for different reasons. And we're going to get into those reasons. But, let's imagine that your mind has its ways sometimes to eject some mental energy in those thoughts. And sometimes it's quite creative in what images it puts up there onto the mental screen. And you may not always like the channel. So you could also switch off or go to the next channel, just like you would do it when you are channel surfing, or when you go through the internet, or when you're swiping to your left on Tinder. You could do the same thing with your thoughts if you realize they don't necessarily tell me that there's something wrong with me. Now, the other thing is that thoughts are not always in your control. We have this idea of we should be, super in charge of where our mind goes. And when there are thoughts coming up that are just seemingly almost, subconscious, and they do often come from the subconscious, coming up and, staring you down, you do feel out of control because you have the idea you should be in control. But the truth is you don't. You don't have control over most of your thoughts. Just like, sometimes your body is twitching out of your control. Sometimes you're just having some little shiver going down your back and you don't even know why. Well, this is also happening with the mind. It can also have these moments that, many moments, where it just operates without of your control. And to be honest, the subconscious that does really a lot of those random thoughts is something that does work underneath your conscious awareness very often. That doesn't mean that your subconscious doesn't listen to the conscious mind, but there's a lot of stuff analyzing and scheming and planning going on the subconscious level that your conscious mind doesn't have to be in control of, because it would be just simply too overwhelming. The third idea that comes often with those thoughts that can scare us is that they tell us the truth, and that they are a reflection of something that could be wrong with you, your character, or that this could really mean that you are in fact someone who is a murderer, or someone who is really thinking about suicide, or someone who is really not trustworthy. Any of those things. The thoughts don't tell you the truth. They just tell you sometimes nothing. Sometimes they are this mental discharge, as I just said. Sometimes it's metaphorical. A lot of those thoughts that come from the subconscious mind are like dreams. When you have a dream and you feel someone is chasing you, or I have dreams where I fly. Sometimes I can talk to whales. I wish I could both, but it's metaphorical. Maybe I will never really completely understand the metaphor. The subconscious has its ways to talk in riddles, but it's not certainly the reality of what's going on. So when you have a thought that disturbs you, it may be quite metaphorical and certainly not literal. So the question is just like, do you have the patience and the curiosity, if it's a thought that you should investigate, to find out what the metaphor means, what's underneath? And that's something we're going to talk about later. And then another thing that I find is important about those thoughts is that they cannot make you act upon. Like you don't really feel that you're in control of your thoughts, which you're not, and that's totally fine. Your thoughts don't control you either. This is where sometimes people, look at hypnotherapy or hypnosis as something where it is a form of mind control. And since it works with the subconscious mind, they are feeling like, well, if these thoughts are coming from the subconscious mind, that means they can control me. They can make me do the things that I'm seeing, and they can't. As long as you have the conscious awareness of what is happening, you also have the conscious choice to say yes or no to a thought. And of course, when you have a thought that's really disturbing, what if I rip my clothes off in the bus or vomit over this person? You have a choice to say, I wouldn't do this, and I don't do it. So you know that with that choice, it won't happen. It's only your anxiety, it's your self doubt that makes that then a theme and a problem in your mind that you cannot really let go of. But overall, you can look at those thoughts as non threatening aspects of your mind. You would not be afraid of your hand or your feet. You don't have to be afraid of whatever your mind is creating, as long as you don't interpret it as something that has to threaten you. So if you're looking at this with more neutrality and say, interesting, it's a thought. Just as I said, it's an image on the internet. It's a little tidbit of a movie that you're not interested in. Then you can also look at it with a greater sense of neutrality. And then you're able to let go of those thoughts more. Now, a lot of people feel letting go of the thoughts means that you have to push them away. Say stop, delete, I don't want you, I banish you. Well, the problem with that is when you do this with invasive thoughts, it's basically coming not from neutrality, it's coming from anxiety. Because somehow you want to chase something away, you want to push something away because it scares you. You don't want to have it around. And the more you do something from anxiety, the more you have an inner resistance inside. And as we all know, whatever we resist persists. So we cannot necessarily just go into this mental tug of war with our thoughts where we are pushing them aside and then looking over our shoulder. Are they still there? Are they still there? And of course, they are still there because we are looking for them. So the pushing away has shown for only about 30% with people that have invasive thoughts or obsessive thoughts, long-term success. Can work in the moment, but it does not necessarily create the long-term success because it doesn't alleviate the anxiety that comes with those thoughts. Your interpretation, your judgment is still there. Now, there was this psychiatrist, Jeffrey Schwartz, who works a lot with neuroplasticity. And he found that what is important to go from that negative interpretation to actually more a sense of neutrality is to add to the letting go part something positive. So when there are, let's say, an invasive thought that used to disturb you, you could say, well, here it is. It's just a thought. I can switch the channel. It's not anything that has a deep meaning to me. Doesn't mean that this is truth or any of those things that that gets you into a more neutral state of mind. But the next step, Schwartz said, is to do something that makes you feel good, so that there is a release of dopamine, which is what happens when you eat chocolate and are really happy. So what this dopamine release does, it's creating a new connection on the brain, new neural pathways, which then it's almost like, the Pavlov dog, you have a negative thought, but your brain, or like an invasive thought, but your brain is then immediately expecting not to feel anxious because you are doing something positive. It's expecting to feel good because something positive happens. In the past, it was invasive thought, anxiety. Now you are disconnecting it. It's like the manual gear shift that you are taking back in your hands, and you're choosing to make now this connection more with something positive. Now, the positive could be listening to nice music. Maybe you have a really nice fragrance, a scent that you enjoy. Maybe there is someone that you want to help, or you just, go for a walk with your puppy that you really love. Anything that brings you into a better state of mind. That is a really good way of letting go, but it doesn't work right away. Neuroplasticity is not something that happens overnight. So people that feel like, well, I want to have instant relief, well, you have to work on making these new connections, these new pathways, and it will take a little bit. So don't feel like I should be doing well, I should be feeling good because I'm helping my neighbor with yard work. You may not. So sometimes it's really more about letting the actions take place and then reflecting later on the actions and saying, that was actually a good deed, or this did actually feel good. And I always liked this song. And then in some ways, almost like retrogradely making these pathways in the brain until it goes more easily and automatically from the invasive thought to that positive action. And I'm not talking about invasive thoughts that, come in and out. You let them go. I mean, again, most of those thoughts are just already there. We don't notice them. And if you look at one and you feel like, there's a thought and it goes away and there is nothing happening afterwards, don't even bother to do something nice for your neighbors or your dog. Just move on. But if you have a feeling there is the chance to go into a negativity spiral because you have done this before, if there is a chance for you to make that thought sticky and bigger than it really needs to be, then that process of letting go by adding something positive can be very effective. Now, if you have any questions, call in at 800-930-2819, 800-930-2819, or you can also ask a question in the chat box or on Facebook Live. we come right back with step number 3.